Hello, and welcome to my Shogunate Japan Museum tour. Over here, we have the two swords belonging to the samurai class. The katana was the main sword used for the battlefield. The katana was 70 centimeters long and it weighed about 1.1 to 1.3 kilograms. It was produced from 1392 until 1573. And the wakizashi is the second sword used for close combat, and seppuku. Seppuku was a Japanese way of ritual suicide reserved for the samurai. It consisted of cutting the abdomen and bleeding to death. The wakizashi was 30 to 60 centimeters long and weighed lighter than the katana. Believe it or not, samurais thought these swords had their own spirits that influenced their battle. This artifact tells us that the samurais were great warriors. To be a samurai, you first had to come from a samurai family. The katana was the main sword used to kill. The wakizashi was the smaller sword used for close combat and ritual suicide. The samurai's practice of suicide was called seppuku. It was done voluntarily by a samurai to die with honor rather than to be killed by the hands of enemies and likely to be tortured. The samurai had to commit suicide by cutting the abdomen and bleeding to death, as I said before. The life for samurais was very pleasing and good because they were the only people allowed to ride horses, carry swords, and even have a last name. They had to be fierce, loyal, and courageous to their daimyos. They also spent much of their life training, practicing, and following the Bushido Code. There were 7 virtues of the Bushido Code: integrity, respect, heroic courage, honor, compassion, honesty, sincerity, and duty and loyalty. Samurais had to practice and follow these virtues. The feudal system benefited the samurais because the wages were higher. They lived comfortably in fairly large areas of land that their daimyos had given to them. Samurais also had respect. If one was not to bow down to the samurai when met, it was the samurai's duty to execute them. The samurais particularly had light armor. Because of this, they were extremely vulnerable in battle. These lives were no different than peasants. The only difference between the two was that the samurai had a bigger hut. If a samurai was to get caught by an enemy, they were to commit suicide. Samurais also had to, if necessary, sacrifice their lives for the daimyos. And here we have the clothing and armor for the daimyo. Every daimyo wore these types of armor. The armor was similar to samurai's, but they had detailed helmets so you could recognize if a daimyo was near you in a battle. The armor was made out of small iron plates and leather. The daimyo were also recognizable by their eboshis. Eboshis were part of the kimono's outfit. Eboshis were stiff hats made out of silk and paper. The armor tells us that they would stand out of the battlefield so the samurais would not mistaken them as their own enemy and knew who to protect. They also had to fight in battle alongside their samurai. The eboshis were used to go in formal events, such as meetings with the shoguns and more stuff like that. The daimyo were third on the feudal pyramid in Japan and lived in the areas that the shoguns had given to them. They built big castles to show their power over the land. They usually built their castles on the mountains so others could see them from far distances away. Although the daimyos were the second rulers in power after the shoguns, they were getting stronger and getting the same respect as the shoguns. Daimyos were the most powerful land-holding people in Japan. Believe it or not, people, they got paid 10,000 grains of rice, which was enough to feed one man for a year, and collected money from taxes. If a daimyo particularly dies, this can actually negatively affect the clan's family tree, and can essentially be left without a daimyo, or a very definitely bad one, in a subtle way. Daimyo were always at risk of being killed by other daimyos. They were kept under strict control by the shogun. For example, the shogun could stop alliances with the daimyo by restricting them to who they married, and daimyo were not allowed to build new castles. And the size of the daimyo's army was limited. Now, here is the Venn diagram. On the left we have the samurai, and on the right we have the knights, and in the middle we have the similarities. Some good things about the samurai were that they had extremely light and flexible armor that would be easy to move around in. For example, in battle, they could be really stealthy and not make a lot of noise when they were to attack their enemies. For the knight, they had strong armor that was made out of steel. This would take a lot of strength to break through, or not at all. The samurais were also very skilled for using weapons like a bow and arrow. Then they were also good at using knives and swords. The knights were used to very heavy and strong metal weapons in their medieval wars that were a lot of help in battle. The samurais had good visibility, and the knights were very skilled horsemanship. The samurais had great stealth and skill. When it came to battle, they would be able to sneak up on an opponent. The knights were very skilled and were fighting intensively since the age of 16. Some similarities about these two were that they both had codes of honor. This means they both had codes to follow, and they were both also hereditary classes, pardon me, and both warriors serve their lords slash daimyos, if you're referring to a samurai and a knight. Thank you for visiting my shogunate museum. This is my bibliography where I got all my information from. Thank you.